Ornate palace gates, dimly lit corridors. Last time, we peeked behind the curtain of Ottoman power. But deep within Topkapi Palace's heart lay a world even more secretive than the Sultan's council chambers, a world often misunderstood. Forget Hollywood's fantasy. The reality of the imperial harem was a complex system that shaped history itself. Ready to uncover its true story? Pause. If you love untold history, hit subscribe and drop a comment with your country. It fuels our journey into the past. Step inside Topkapi's harem. Imagine a hidden city within a city. It wasn't just lavish rooms. It was a massive institution requiring over 1,200 staff just to function. Behind these dazzling walls lived hundreds of women. But who were they, really? Here's a twist many miss. Most entered this gilded cage not by choice. They came as captives from battles across Europe and Asia, or were brought through complex networks. Many arrived incredibly young, taken far from homes in the Balkans, the Caucasus, or Africa. Think about that journey, a child thrust into the epic enter of an empire. Why so young? The Ottomans believed youth allowed for transformation. They learned fluent Ottoman Turkish, studied Islamic faith and culture, and trained intensely in arts like music, calligraphy, and palace etiquette. This wasn't just finishing school. It was preparation for life at the very top. Curious fact. Some girls, like the legendary Hurrem Sultan, rose from this system to become incredibly powerful figures influencing sultans and shaping global politics. How did that happen? We'll explore that climb to power next time. Visual. Hint at Hurrem Sultan portrait or powerful imagery. Music swells slightly. The harem was a microcosm of the empire, a place of strict rules, intense training, and surprising social mobility. It's a story of survival, adaptation, and the hidden forces that move an empire. What role did faith play? How did daily life really work? Stick around, because we're diving deeper into the secrets of Topkapi next. Visual, ornate courtyard, women in period dress. Focus on expressions, some watchful, some tense. Step into the harem courtyard. It looks serene, right? But beneath the surface, it ran on a razor-sharp hierarchy. Think of it like the world's most intense boarding school mixed with imperial politics. Everyone had a rank, from the newest arrival right up to the Valide Sultan, the Sultan's mother, the undisputed queen of this domain. For a young girl just arriving, it was overwhelming. Imagine being dropped into a gilded jungle with its own rules. Senior women, who'd survived years within these walls, held immense power over newcomers. Why? Because your position was everything. Higher rank meant better quarters, privileges, and crucially, a shot at being noticed. This intense structure created fierce competition. It wasn't about being mean for no reason. It was about survival and strategy in a closed world where your future depended entirely on moving up. New girls face immense pressure to learn fast, adapt completely, and find their place. The system was designed to reshape them, focusing their entire being on life within the palace walls. Curious angle. How did anyone succeed? It took incredible resilience. Some mastered the arts, others excelled at diplomacy within the harem's complex social web. Remember Hurrem Sultan? She didn't just survive this pressure cooker. She mastered it, using her intelligence and influence to change Ottoman history itself. Next time, we'll crack the code. How did the smartest players navigate the harem's hidden rules to reach the top? Visual. Quick hint of harem or strategic-looking scene. Music shifts slightly. So, the harem courtyard? Less a peaceful garden, more a training ground for the sharpest minds in the empire. It was a world where understanding the rules, written and unwritten, was the ultimate key to power. What were those unwritten rules? We're uncovering them next. Visual. Opulent Sultan's chamber doorway. Focus on intricate design, not intimate scenes. Inside Topkapi, the Sultan's private world was governed by unique imperial rules. While Islamic tradition permitted 4 wives, Ottoman sultans followed a different path for centuries. Starting in the 1500s, they stopped formal marriages altogether. Instead, their heirs came exclusively from mothers within the harem system, women who entered as slaves but held the future of the empire in their hands. Why this shift? It was all about dynastic control. Visual. Quick cuts of scrolls or ledgers in a records room, then the harem's living quarters. The harem wasn't chaotic. It ran with almost military precision. Detailed record tracked every woman, her origin, skills, and lineage. Think of it like the empire's most crucial HR department. This meticulous system ensured order in a community housing hundreds. Visual. Peaceful nursery scene. Focus on architecture, caregivers, not explicit drama. But the most fascinating rule? The one mother, one son policy. Here's how it worked. Once a concubine gave birth to a male heir, her role changed dramatically. She stopped being in the romantic spotlight and focused entirely on raising the future prince. Why? To prevent rival mothers from forming powerful factions inside the harem that could threaten the sultan's authority or spark civil wars later. Her status now came from being the Valide sultan-in-waiting, potentially the most powerful woman in the empire if her son became sultan. What if a concubine didn't conceive? Palace rules were strict. After a short period, she might be honorably married to a high-ranking military officer or statesman. This wasn't punishment, but a strategic move. It extended the sultan's influence by creating loyal families across the empire. These women became respected figures in Ottoman society. The real power play, imagine the pressure. A young woman's entire future and her child's destiny rested on navigating this complex system. But here's the twist. For those who succeeded, the rewards were immense. The mother of a sultan wielded extraordinary influence as Valide sultan, often shaping foreign policy and controlling vast resources. Next time, we reveal how these remarkable women, like the legendary harem or Ottoman Sultan, turned motherhood into ultimate political power. Visual, portraits of powerful Valide sultans. Music swells with intrigue. So, the harem's rules? They weren't just about palace life. They were the heartbeat of Ottoman dynasty building for centuries. It was a world where biology met empire, and where the most strategic mothers changed history. Want to meet these ultimate power players? Subscribe and hit the bell. That story drops next. Visual. Grand Topkapi Palace corridors. Focus on architecture, guards, not individuals. The Ottoman succession machine ran on strict rules. To prevent any single family from gaining too much influence inside the palace, sultans followed a unique system. Heirs came only from mothers within the harem. Once a concubine gave birth to a son, her role shifted dramatically. She became a prince's mother, dedicating herself to raising a future ruler. This one mother, one son rule wasn't personal. It was imperial strategy. It stopped powerful rival mother factions from forming and kept succession clear. Visual. Quick glimpse of an ornate palace medical text astrolabe. No graphic content. Palace physicians played a key role. They weren't just doctors. They were guardians of the dynasty. They carefully tracked health and lineage, vital information when the future of an empire depended on healthy heirs. Medical knowledge then was different, blending science with traditions we might find surprising today. Their priority? Ensuring the continuation of the Ottoman line. The high-stakes game. Imagine the pressure. For a young woman in the harem, bearing a son meant securing her future as a Valide sultan, if her son ruled. But it also meant her intimate connection to the sultan ended. It was a trade-off. Immense potential power later, for a very defined role change now. Those who didn't conceive were often married into the empire's elite, becoming influential figures themselves across Ottoman society. Visual. Shift to the imposing throne room. But keeping an empire stable for 600-plus years involved tough choices. One of the most controversial, early Ottoman succession practices. To prevent devastating civil wars between brothers, a law allowed a new sultan to remove potential rivals. This harsh practice, known as fratricide, aimed for stability but came at a terrible human cost. Later sultans replaced it with a cave system, golden cages, confining princes to the palace instead. An absolute power, it could twist anyone. Take Sultan Ibrahim. His reign showed what happened when immense authority met deep personal instability, leading to chaotic decisions that shook the empire and ultimately cost him his throne and life. Curious fact. It was often the powerful Valide sultans or grand viziers who stepped in to remove such rulers, acting to save the empire from collapse. Visual. Portrait of a powerful Valide sultan like Kozum. So, was a harem just about the sultan? No way. It became a powerhouse of its own. Next time, we meet the real rulers behind the throne, the Valide sultans and chief black eunuchs. Discover how these incredibly savvy individuals pulled the empire's string for centuries, the ultimate political insiders. Want that power story? Smash subscribe and hit the bell. Visual, dawn breaking over Topkapi's courtyards, serene but with hints of grandeur and power. As dawn touched Topkapi, the weight of empire rested on one question: how do you keep an empire stable for 600 years? The Ottomans had a radical answer, and it involved the most dramatic succession rule in royal history. Forget Game of Thrones, this was real. Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror himself, didn't just take Constantinople. He reshaped Ottoman destiny. Fearing the civil wars that tore apart earlier empires, like the Byzantines he conquered, he made a tough, controversial law: fratricide. This meant a new sultan could legally remove his brothers to secure the throne. Why? Not cruelty, but cold calculus. One sultan, one line. They believed a single, undisputed heir prevented devastating wars that could shatter the empire and cost millions of lives. Visual, historical manuscript image of Mehmed II's law. Focus on text, not imagery. The scale was staggering. Take 1595. When Mehmed III took power, 19 of his brothers were removed in a single, somber day. Imagine that burden. These weren't strangers. They were princes raised together within these very walls. It was a brutal solution to an ancient royal problem. Too many heirs, not enough thrones. Fascinating detail, even the method was ritualized. Princes were said to be dealt with respectfully, using silk, symbolizing their royal status, by executioners chosen for their silence, deaf mutes. This wasn't just about the act, but about maintaining order and dignity in an impossible moment for the dynasty. Visual, transition to the cave system, ornate pavilion windows. But history evolves. Later sultans saw the toll. By the 1600s, the brutal law was replaced by the caves, the cage, luxurious palace apartments where princes lived in comfort but strict isolation, studied and waited indefinitely. Was this kinder? It prevented violence, but created new challenges. Sultans sometimes rose to power after decades of isolation, unprepared to rule a vast empire. The ultimate power move: who often decided a sultan's fate or protected princes? The mighty Valide Sultan, Queen Mother. Figures like Kozum Sultan became masters of palace intrigue, navigating these brutal rules to protect their sons, influence succession, and essentially run the empire behind the scenes. Next time, we reveal how these women outmaneuvered everyone to become the empire's shadow rulers. Visual, powerful portrait of Kozum Sultan. Music swells with intrigue. The Ottoman throne? It was the ultimate high-stakes game. Subscribe now to uncover the secrets of the Sultanate's most powerful women, the true architect of imperial survival. Visual, opulent chamber of Valide Sultan. Focus on strategy, not grief. The Valide Sultan's chambers were the empire's true nerve center. But the succession rules cast a long shadow. Imagine raising princes knowing only one might survive to rule. Valide sultans like Kozum became masters of high-stakes diplomacy, protecting sons, navigating deadly politics, and sometimes making impossible choices to preserve the dynasty. Their strength held the empire together through its darkest succession crises. Visual, young princes studying in palace school. Focus on education, not fear. For princes, palace life was intense. They received world-class education in politics, war, and religion, knowing the throne demanded excellence. The old succession rules added immense pressure, creating an environment where trust was complex. Did this make brothers enemies? Often, yes. It was the system's tragic flaw. But brilliant Valide sultans worked tirelessly to shield younger sons, sometimes securing their safety through careful negotiation or exile rather than violence. Visual, sunset over historic Istanbul skyline. Absolute power tested every ruler. Sultan Ibrahim's reign became a cautionary tale. When mental instability gripped a sultan unchecked, the results could shake the empire. Ibrahim ignored wise counsel, made reckless demands, and damaged vital relationships with his nobles and people. His actions weren't depravity. They were the dangerous breakdown of imperial responsibility. Visual, scroll showing official decree, then council meeting. The Grand Vizier incident reveals the system's safeguards. When Ibrahim overstepped, crossing sacred lines of honor and protocol, the empire pushed back. The powerful ulama, Islamic scholars, and Janissary commanders joined forces with the Valide Sultan. Together, they invoked ancient laws protecting subjects' rights and removed Ibrahim from power. This proved no sultan was above the empire's laws and moral foundations. The real story, Ibrahim's downfall, wasn't about one woman. It was about balance of power. The Ottoman system had remarkable resilience. When a sultan threatened its core stability, the very institutions he ruled, the scholars, the military, the palace elite, could intervene to protect the greater good of the state. Power lesson: even absolute rulers had limits. Visual: portrait of Ottoman Sultan decisively addressing council. Next episode: discover how Queen Mother Ottoman Sultan, the ultimate political survivor, navigated this crisis and ruled the empire twice as regent. How did she outsmart armies, viziers, and rival sultans? Subscribe now for the most powerful woman in Ottoman history. Visual: serene Topkapi Gardens. Focus on architecture, plants, not people. Sultan Ibrahim's reign became the ultimate test for Ottoman stability. As his mental state declined, he ignored centuries of tradition and wise counsel. His actions grew increasingly erratic, demanding impossible things, alienating key allies, and violating sacred palace protocols. This wasn't just about personal behavior. It threatened the entire imperial system. Visual: ornate palace corridor. Focus on tile work, not specific rooms. The harim, normally a place of strict order and hierarchy, descended into chaos under his rule. Historical accounts describe scenes of confusion and fear, a far cry from its usual disciplined environment. Ibrahim broke fundamental rules governing sultanic conduct, treating sacred palace traditions with disregard. Visual: ancient Ottoman manuscripts showing court proceedings. The breaking point: everything changed after an incident involving a high-ranking family. When Ibrahim violated the honor of a Grand Vizier's household, crossing a sacred line in Ottoman society, the empire's powerful institutions united against him. The ulama, Islamic scholars, declared his actions against Sharia and imperial law. The Janissary commanders saw the threat to state stability. Even his own mother, Valide Sultan Kozum, knew the empire itself was in danger. Visual: dramatic but non-violent recreation of council meeting. Together, they took extraordinary action. Invoking ancient Ottoman laws that held sultans accountable, they removed Ibrahim from power. This wasn't a coup, it was a system protecting itself. The most shocking event? His entire harem was dissolved and relocated. Contemporary chroniclers wrote of it as a tragic necessity to cleanse a palace of instability, symbolizing the end of a dark chapter. Visual: Bosphorus at sunset. Peaceful, no violence implied. The real lesson: this moment proved the Ottoman Empire's incredible resilience. No sultan, no matter how powerful, was above the law or the collective will of its institutions. When leadership failed, the system had safeguards: the wisdom of scholars, the loyalty of the military, and the authority of the Valide Sultan. Visual: portrait of Ottoman Sultan looking authoritative. Coming UP: how did Queen Mother Ottoman Sultan pick up the pieces? Discover how she became regent and ruled the empire twice, navigating civil wars, foreign threats, and palace intrigue to save the Ottoman throne. Her story is the ultimate political thriller. Subscribe now for the most powerful woman in Islamic history. The Topkapi Palace stands as a monument to imperial power, but its walls hold complex truths. The Ottoman Empire lasted over 600 years through remarkable systems: grand viziers, scholars, soldiers, and yes, the influential women of the harem. Yet absolute power also created deep vulnerabilities. Visual: ancient manuscripts showing court decrees. When sultans like Ibrahim or Murad ignored justice and wisdom, violating Ottoman law and Islamic principles, the empire itself pushed back. The ulama, scholars, janissaries, and Valide sultans weren't powerless. They were the empire's immune system, removing rulers who threatened its soul. Visual: montage. Scholars debating, soldiers drilling, Valide Sultan in council. The real legacy? Not horror, but resilience. This empire survived crises because its institutions, shaped by law, faith, and tradition, could correct even the worst leadership. The powerful Valide sultans like Kozum didn't just clean up messes. They ruled, guiding the empire through civil wars and invasions. Visual. Focus on Sultan Sultan's portrait, then a diverse Ottoman street scene. History's lesson: power demands balance. The Ottomans teach us that no ruler, no system, lasts without justice, ADL, and accountability. When leaders forget the people's trust, when law is ignored, empires crumble. But when wisdom and courage unite, like the ulama and Sultan Sultan did, societies can heal. Visual. Modern Istanbul skyline blending with historic minarets. So, were harems just